Captain Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the wreckage of the alien transport ship. The Zephyrian vessel had crashed 3 days ago on this desolate moon, sending distress signals across multiple frequencies before going silent. As part of the Terran Rescue Corps, Jake's team had been dispatched immediately, but hyperspace travel took time. Even with the latest human technology, the crash site stretched across nearly 2 kilometers of rocky terrain. Twisted metal and strange crystalline components littered the ground like scattered bones. Jake's scanner detected no life signs from the main wreckage, but something else caught his attention. Faint bio-readings emanated from a section about half a kilometer away from the primary impact zone. "Rodriguez, Chen with me," Jake called to his team members. "Patel, stay with the shuttle and keep monitoring for any incoming ships." The 3 humans made their way across the alien landscape, their boots crunching on the violet-colored sand. This moon orbited a gas giant, and the massive planet dominated the sky above them, casting an eerie purple glow across everything. Jake had been on dozens of rescue missions, but alien crash sites always made him feel small in the universe. As they approached the bio-reading location, Jake heard something that made him stop cold. A low rumbling sound echoed across the barren landscape. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic, and it sounded like pain. "Sir, that's definitely a life form," Rodriguez said, checking her scanner. "Large mammalian, probably predatory based on the size readings." Jake nodded and signaled for his team to spread out. They moved carefully around a large piece of debris that had formed a natural shelter. What they found on the other side made Jake's breath catch in his throat. A massive creature lay on its side, barely breathing. It resembled a lion from Earth but was easily 3 times larger. Its fur was a deep golden color with silver stripes running down its flanks. Most striking were its eyes, intelligent, aware, and filled with a very human-like sadness. The creature was clearly dying. "My God," Chen whispered. "Look at the size of that thing." Jake approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. The creature's eyes tracked his movement, but it made no aggressive moves. As Jake got closer, he could see the problem. A piece of metal debris had pierced the animal's side, and green blood had pooled beneath it. The wound was severe, but Jake's military medical training told him it wasn't necessarily fatal if treated quickly. "Rodriguez, get the medical kit. Chen, help me assess the damage." The creature watched them work, seeming to understand they were trying to help. Jake had dealt with injured animals before, but never anything quite like this. The intelligence in those golden eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't just an animal. It was something more. As Rodriguez returned with the medical supplies, Jake noticed something else. Around the creature's neck was a collar made of the same crystalline material he'd seen in the wreckage. Intricate patterns were carved into its surface, and it pulsed with a faint blue light. This was definitely not a wild animal. "This belongs to someone," Jake said, examining the collar more closely. "Probably one of the passengers on that ship." The creature made a soft rumbling sound, almost like a purr, when Jake touched the collar. It was trying to communicate something. "Sir, I'm reading multiple Zephyrian life signs approaching from the south." Patel's voice crackled through their communicators. "Looks like survivors from the crash. They'll be here in about 10 minutes. Jake looked down at the injured creature. 10 minutes wasn't enough time to properly treat its wounds, but it might be enough to stabilize it. He made a decision that would change everything. "We're going to help you, big guy," Jake said softly, beginning to clean the wound. "Just hold on." The creature seemed to understand. It remained perfectly still as Jake and his team worked to remove the debris and seal the wound with their emergency medical foam. It was a temporary solution, but it would stop the bleeding and give the animal a chance. As they finished, Jake heard voices approaching. The Zephyrians had arrived. He stood and turned to face them, not sure what to expect. The Zephyrians were tall, elegant beings with pale blue skin and long white hair. They wore flowing robes that seemed to shimmer in the gas giant's light. Their leader, a female with an elaborate headdress, approached the group. Her expression was cold and imperious. "Humans," she said in accented but clear English. "You should not have interfered." Jake stepped forward. "We're part of the Terran Rescue Corps. We came as soon as we received your distress signal. This animal is injured and needs medical attention." The Zephyrian leader glanced at the creature with what looked like disgust. "That beast is no longer of consequence. It failed in its duty and is therefore worthless. Leave it to die as it deserves." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "Failed in its duty? What are you talking about?" I am Princess Alara of the Zephyrian royal house, the female replied haughtily. This creature was my guardian, bound to protect me with its life. When our ship was attacked by pirates, it hesitated to engage the enemy. Because of its cowardice, we nearly died. It is no longer worthy of the honor of serving our house. Jake looked back at the injured animal. The creature's eyes were fixed on the princess, and Jake could swear he saw hurt and betrayal in that golden gaze. Whatever had happened during the attack, Jake doubted cowardice had anything to do with it. You're just going to leave it here to die? Jake asked incredulously. Its fate is no longer my concern, Princess Alara said coldly. Come, we must prepare for evacuation. As the Zephyrians moved away to set up their own rescue beacon, Jake knelt beside the creature again. The animal's breathing was steadier now thanks to their medical intervention, but it would need more help to fully recover. Don't worry, Jake whispered. I'm not leaving you here. The creature's eyes met his, and Jake felt a connection form between them. Whatever the princess thought about duty and failure, Jake knew he was looking at a being worth saving. The rescue mission had just become something much more personal. In the distance, Princess Alara called for her servants to attend her, her voice sharp and commanding. She didn't even glance back at the creature she had abandoned. Jake made a silent promise to the injured animal and to himself. This wasn't going to end here. 2 hours later, Jake sat beside the injured creature as both rescue ships prepared for departure. The Zephyrian vessel had arrived first, a sleek silver craft that looked more like a work of art than a spaceship. Princess Alara and her entourage had boarded without a backward glance at their former guardian. Jake's own rescue ship, the Terran vessel Mercy, was a stark contrast, functional, sturdy, and built for emergencies rather than elegance. Captain Sarah Kim, Jake's commanding officer, approached with a concerned expression. Morrison, we need to discuss this situation, she said, gesturing toward the creature. Command is asking questions about why we're bringing an alien animal aboard. Jake looked up from where he knelt beside the massive lion-like being. He'd been monitoring its vital signs with their portable medical scanner, and the readings were slowly improving. The creature's eyes remained alert, tracking the conversations around it with obvious intelligence. This isn't just an animal, Captain, Jake replied. Look at those eyes. There's intelligence here, real consciousness. And besides, we can't just leave a sentient being to die because its former owner abandoned it. Captain Kim crouched down beside them. She was a veteran of many rescue missions and had learned to trust Jake's instincts. What do you know about Zephyrian guardian animals? Not much, Jake admitted. But I'm going to learn. This creature deserves better than what it got from that princess. Rodriguez approached from the shuttle ramp. Sir, I've been doing some research on our database. Zephyrian guardians aren't actually animals at all. They're a partner species called the Valyrians. They form lifetime bonds with Zephyrian royalty as protectors and companions. Jake felt his anger toward Princess Alara deepen. So she didn't just abandon a pet. She abandoned a sentient ally. According to the records, Valyrians are highly intelligent, telepathically gifted, and incredibly loyal. Rodriguez continued. They've been partners with the Zephyrians for over 1,000 years. Breaking the bond is considered one of the most shameful acts in their society. The creature made a soft rumbling sound, as if responding to the conversation. Jake reached out carefully and placed his hand on its massive head. The fur was softer than he'd expected, and he could feel the powerful muscles beneath. What's your name, friend? Jake asked softly. For a moment nothing happened. Then Jake felt something strange in his mind, not quite words, but an impression, a feeling. The creature was trying to communicate with him. Did you feel that? He asked Rodriguez and Captain Kim. Feel what? Kim replied. Jake frowned. Maybe the telepathic connection only worked with certain people, or maybe it required physical contact. He kept his hand on the creature's head and concentrated on being open to communication. Again, that strange sensation in his mind. This time it was clearer. Not words exactly, but concepts, emotions, and something that might have been a name. Corvash. Corvash, Jake said aloud. Is that your name? The creature's eyes brightened and its tail moved slightly. Jake took that as confirmation. All right, Corvash it is, Captain Kim said with a slight smile. But we still have protocols to follow. Bringing an alien being aboard a Terran vessel requires authorization from command. Jake was about to respond when his communicator chirped. A holographic image of Admiral Chen, head of the Terran Rescue Corps, appeared above the device. Captain Morrison, the Admiral said without preamble. I understand you've encountered a situation involving a Zephyrian guardian animal. Yes, sir. The creature was abandoned and injured. We've provided medical assistance, but it needs more extensive treatment. Admiral Chen's expression was unreadable. I've been in contact with the Zephyrian embassy. They've informed me that the creature has been formally released from service and is no longer their responsibility. Which means, Jake asked, which means it's now classified as a refugee under Galactic Council protocols. If you're willing to take responsibility for its care and rehabilitation, the Corps will support your decision. Jake felt relief wash over him. I accept full responsibility, sir. Very well. But Morrison, understand that this isn't just about medical care. Valerians are not pets. If this being recovers, you're looking at a lifetime commitment to a highly intelligent partner. Are you prepared for that? Jake looked down at Corvash, whose golden eyes were fixed on his face. The trust he saw there made his decision easy. Yes, sir. I'm prepared. Then bring him home, Captain. Dr. Yamamoto at the Xenobiology lab is expecting you. She's already started preparing a treatment plan. The hologram flickered off and Jake felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He just committed to caring for an alien being he barely understood, but as he looked at Corvash, he knew he'd made the right choice. All right, big guy, Jake said. Let's get you proper medical attention. Getting Corvash aboard the Mercy proved to be a challenge. Even injured, the Valerian was massive, nearly 4 meters long and probably weighing close to 400 kilograms. It took the entire crew working together with anti-grav stretchers to safely transport him to the ship's medical bay. Dr. Martinez, the ship's medical officer, was fascinated by their new patient. I've never treated a Valerian before, she admitted as she ran advanced scans. But their physiology is similar enough to Earth mammals that our medical techniques should work. Corvash remained calm throughout the examination, seeming to understand that these humans were trying to help him. Jake stayed close, maintaining physical contact when possible. Each time he touched the Valerian, he felt those strange mental impressions, gratitude, pain, and something deeper that might have been grief. The good news is that the internal damage is minimal, Dr. Martinez reported. The debris missed all major organs. With proper treatment, he should make a full recovery. The bad news is that he's severely malnourished and dehydrated. My guess is that he wasn't being properly cared for even before the crash. Jake felt another surge of anger toward Princess Alara. How could someone treat a loyal companion so poorly? As the ship entered hyperspace for the journey back to Earth, Jake settled into a chair beside Corvash's medical bed. The Valerian was sleeping now, his breathing deep and regular. The immediate crisis was over. But Jake knew the real challenge was just beginning. He'd rescued an alien being, but what came next? How did one care for a telepathic lion-like creature from another world? How could he help Corvash heal not just physically, but emotionally from the betrayal he'd suffered? Jake pulled out his tablet and began researching everything he could find about Valerians and their culture. If he was going to be Corvash's new partner, he had a lot to learn, and somehow he suspected that Corvash had even more to teach him in return. The journey home would take 3 days. Jake planned to use every moment to prepare for the new life that awaited them both. The Terran Xenobiology Research Facility on Earth was nothing like the cold, clinical medical facilities Jake had expected. Dr. Elena Yamamoto had designed it to be as welcoming as possible for alien species, with adjustable lighting, climate controls, and living spaces that could be customized for different physiological needs. Corvash had been recovering there for 2 weeks now, and the change in his condition was remarkable. The malnutrition and dehydration that had weakened him were slowly being corrected, and his wounded side had healed completely. More importantly, some of the sadness had left his golden eyes. Jake visited every day after his duties with the Rescue Corps. He'd been granted extended leave to help with Corvash's rehabilitation, and he was using the time to learn everything he could about Valerian culture and biology. The telepathic bond is fascinating, Dr. Yamamoto explained as they watched Corvash exercise in the facility's large recreation area. Valerians can communicate with most sentient species, but the connection is much stronger with some individuals than others. You seem to have a natural compatibility, Jake nodded. Over the past 2 weeks, his communication with Corvash had improved dramatically. What had started as vague impressions and emotions had developed into something approaching actual conversation. Not words exactly, but concepts and ideas that Jake could understand with increasing clarity. What I find interesting, Dr. Yamamoto continued, is that Corvash is teaching you their language as much as you're learning it. The telepathic bond works both ways. That was true. Jake had noticed that his own thoughts seemed clearer when he was near Corvash, as if the Valerian's presence was somehow enhancing his mental processes. It was a strange sensation, but not an unpleasant one. Corvash approached them across the recreation area, moving with the fluid grace that was returning as his strength came back. The Valerian was truly magnificent when healthy. His golden fur with silver markings gleamed and his powerful muscles rippled beneath his coat. "Jake, friend," came the familiar mental voice. "New knowledge for you," Jake smiled. Corvash had started using the term Jake friend when he couldn't quite translate the concept of a name. It was endearing and Jake had grown fond of it. What knowledge, Corvash? Images filled Jake's mind. Memories from Corvash's perspective. He saw Princess Alara as a young child, meeting Corvash for the first time when he was barely more than a cub. There had been genuine affection between them then, a bond of friendship and mutual respect. But as the years passed, something had changed. Alara had become colder, more concerned with status and power than with the welfare of those around her. The bond between them had weakened, not through any fault of Corvash's, but because Alara had chosen to close her mind and heart to him. Jake felt Corvash's pain, as if it were his own. The Valerian had tried desperately to maintain their connection, to serve faithfully despite his partner's growing indifference. The final betrayal had come during the pirate attack. More images flooded Jake's mind. The transport ship under assault, Corvash fighting desperately to protect not just Alara but all the passengers aboard. He had taken severe injuries defending them, injuries that had slowed his response when the final wave of attackers had come. It hadn't been cowardice. It had been exhaustion from defending ungrateful charges. When the attack was over and they had escaped, Alara had blamed Corvash for not fighting harder, for not being fast enough. She had refused to acknowledge his injuries or his sacrifice. In her mind, he had failed her, and that failure was unforgivable. She was wrong, Jake said aloud, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't fail anyone. You were a hero. Not hero, Corvash replied, though Jake could sense the Valerian's gratitude for his words. Just guardian. Was duty. No, Jake said firmly. You went above and beyond duty. What you did was heroic, whether she acknowledged it or not. Dr. Yamamoto had been watching their interaction with interest. You two have developed quite a strong bond already. In some ways, it's stronger than what most Valerians have with their Zephyrian partners. Jake was curious about that. How so? Zephyrian bonds are often formal, based on tradition and obligation. What you and Corvash have is based on genuine mutual respect and affection. There's no sense of ownership or superiority on either side. That evening, Jake sat in his apartment reading more about Valerian culture when his doorbell chimed. He opened the door to find Admiral Chen standing in the hallway, looking unusually serious. Admiral, Jake said, stepping aside to let him in. This is unexpected. We need to talk, Morrison. About your Valerian friend, Jake tensed. Is there a problem? Admiral Chen settled into a chair and fixed Jake with a steady gaze. The Zephyrian embassy has been in contact with us again. It seems Princess Alara is having second thoughts about releasing Corvash from service. What kind of second thoughts? The kind that involve demanding his return? Apparently her family has decided that abandoning a Valerian guardian reflects poorly on their royal house. They want to correct the situation by reclaiming him. Jake felt anger building in his chest. They can't do that. She formally released him. You said he was classified as a refugee. Refugee status can be complicated when it involves property disputes, Admiral Chen said grimly. The Zephyrians are claiming that Alara didn't have the authority to release Corvash, that only the royal family as a whole can make that decision. Property? Jake's voice was dangerously quiet. Corvash isn't property. He's a sentient being with rights. I agree with you, Morrison, but interstellar law is complex and the Zephyrians have significant political influence. If they push this through diplomatic channels, we might not have a choice. Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he looked up at Admiral Chen with determination in his eyes. What if Corvash doesn't want to go back? Doesn't he have a say in this? That's actually the one avenue we might be able to pursue, Admiral Chen said. If Corvash can formally request asylum and demonstrate that returning to Zephyrian custody would cause him harm, We might be able to protect him under Galactic Council humanitarian protocols. Then that's what we'll do. Admiral Chen stood to leave. Morrison, understand what you're getting into. Fighting the Zephyrian royal family through diplomatic channels could end your career in the Rescue Corps. Are you prepared for that? Jake didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. Corvash risked everything to protect people who didn't deserve his loyalty. The least I can do is risk my career to protect him. After Admiral Chen left, Jake immediately called Dr. Yamamoto and explained the situation. They needed to move quickly. If the Zephyrians were serious about reclaiming Corvash, they had to be prepared. The next morning, Jake sat with Corvash in the research facility and explained what was happening. The Valerian listened with growing distress as Jake outlined the situation. Not go back, Corvash said firmly when Jake finished. Choose Jake, friend. Choose human pack, then we'll fight for you, Jake promised. But it won't be easy. Are you ready for that? Corvash stood and moved closer to Jake, placing his massive head against Jake's shoulder. The gesture was unmistakably one of trust and affection. Ready? The Valerian replied. Fight together. Jake wrapped his arms around Corvash's neck, feeling the strength and warmth of his alien friend. Whatever came next, they would face it as partners. The bond between them had grown from a simple rescue into something much deeper, a friendship that transcended species and culture. The real battle was just beginning. The Galactic Council hearing chamber was an imposing space, designed to accommodate dozens of different alien species. Jake sat at the defense table with his assigned advocate, a stern-faced human diplomat named Ambassador Sarah Reeves. Across the chamber, the Zephyrian delegation occupied their seats with regal composure. Princess Alara was there, looking as imperious as ever in her flowing robes and jeweled headdress. She hadn't even glanced in Corvash's direction when they'd entered the chamber. Beside her sat her father, Prince Regent Valdris, a tall Zephyrian with silver hair and cold blue eyes. Corvash lay on a specially designed platform next to Jake's table. The Valerian had grown even more magnificent over the past month as his health improved. His golden fur gleamed under the chamber's lights, and his intelligent eyes surveyed the proceedings with obvious understanding. The presiding judge was a Cathari, an insectoid species known for their strict adherence to law and precedent. Judge Clackthrex's multiple eyes fixed on each party as she called the hearing to order. This tribunal will address the custody dispute regarding the Valerian-designated Corvash, she announced in her clicking, translated voice. The Zephyrian royal house claims ownership and demands return of their property. The human Jake Morrison claims custody under refugee protection protocols. Prince Regent Valdris rose first. Honored Judge, this is a simple matter of property law. The Valerian in question was bonded to our house for over 20 years. Our daughter acted emotionally and without proper authority when she claimed to release him. Such a release requires formal approval from the royal family, which was never given. Ambassador Reeves stood to respond. With respect, Your Honor, we're not dealing with property here. We're dealing with a sentient being who was abandoned by his supposed caretakers and left to die. Under Galactic Council humanitarian laws, Corvash has the right to seek asylum from those who would harm him. Judge Clackthrex's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The court recognizes the complexity of this case. We will hear testimony from all relevant parties. Princess Alara, please explain your actions on the moon where the rescue took place. Princess Alara stood gracefully, her chin held high. The creature failed in its fundamental duty to protect our transport. When pirates attacked our vessel, it showed cowardice and hesitation. Its failure nearly cost us our lives. Under Zephyrian law, a guardian who fails to fulfill its bond forfeits all rights and protections. Jake felt Corvash's mental anguish through their bond. The Valerian's pain was so intense that Jake had to grip the edge of his chair to keep from crying out. Your Honor, Ambassador Reeves said, we dispute that characterization entirely. We have evidence that Corvash fought heroically to defend the transport, sustaining severe injuries in the process. Judge Clacktthrex nodded. The court will review all evidence. But first, we must address a fundamental question. Can the being in question speak for himself? All eyes turned to Corvash. The Valerian raised his massive head and looked directly at the judge. What happened next surprised everyone in the chamber. Instead of the telepathic communication he used with Jake, Corvash spoke aloud in the common galactic tongue, his voice a deep rumble that carried clearly through the chamber. I can speak for myself, honored judge. There were murmurs of surprise throughout the chamber. Even Jake was startled. He hadn't known Corvash could speak vocally. "Very well," Judge Clackthrex said. "Corvash of the Valerians, do you wish to return to Zephyrian custody?" "No," Corvash replied without hesitation. "I do not." Prince Regent Valdris looked furious. "The creature's wishes are irrelevant. It is bound by sacred law and ancient contract." "Your Honor," Ambassador Reeves interjected, "I'd like to present evidence of the conditions Corvash endured under Zephyrian care." Dr. Yamamoto, who had been observing from the gallery, came forward with a holographic display. The images showed Corvash's condition when Jake had found him: malnourished, dehydrated, and suffering from old injuries that had never been properly treated. These medical scans show systematic neglect over a period of months, possibly years, Dr. Yamamoto testified. This being was slowly dying from lack of proper care even before the crash. Princess Alara's face flushed with anger. Those injuries were the result of the creature's own failures in combat. We are not responsible for wounds suffered due to incompetence. Jake couldn't stay silent any longer. He stood up, ignoring Ambassador Reeves's warning look. "Your Honor, I was there. I saw what Princess Alara did. She looked at Corvash, bleeding and dying, and told us to leave him to die because he was worthless. That's not the behavior of someone who cares about a partner or even a pet. That's cruelty. You will address the court properly," Prince Regent Valdris snapped. "You are speaking to royalty." Jake's eyes blazed. "I'm speaking to someone who abandoned a loyal friend to die alone on a barren moon. Royal title doesn't excuse that kind of behavior." Judge Clackthrex raised a clawed hand for silence. "The court will maintain order. Corvash, you claim you do not wish to return to Zephyrian custody. Can you tell us why?" Corvash was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years of pain. "I served faithfully for 23 years, he said. "I protected not just Princess Alara, but her family, her servants, everyone in her household. I took wounds that still ache in the cold. I gave everything I had to give." He paused, his golden eyes finding Princess Alara's face. "But I was never more than a tool to them. When that tool became inconvenient, they discarded it. Jake Friend found me dying and chose to save me. Not because I was useful, but because I was alive and in pain. That is the difference between ownership and partnership." The chamber was silent as Corvash's words sank in. Even some of the Zephyrian delegation looked uncomfortable. "Furthermore," Corvash continued, "I invoke the ancient right of Valerian self-determination. No Valerian can be forced to serve those who have broken faith with them. Princess Alara severed our bond when she abandoned me. I now choose to bond with Jake Morrison, who has shown me true partnership and respect." Prince Regent Valdris stood abruptly. "This is preposterous. No Valerian has ever bonded with a human." "It's impossible." Judge Clackthrex looked intrigued. "Corvash, you claim to have formed a bond with the human Jake Morrison. Can you demonstrate this?" Corvash looked at Jake, who nodded and approached. Jake placed his hand on Corvash's head, and immediately the chamber filled with a soft, golden glow. The light seemed to emanate from both of them, growing brighter as their mental connection deepened. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even Judge Clackthrex's multiple eyes widened in surprise. The golden light was the traditional sign of a true Valerian bond, something that was supposed to be impossible between different species. "Remarkable," the judge murmured. "In 800 years of Galactic Council proceedings, we have never witnessed an interspecies Valerian bond." Princess Alara was staring at the display with obvious shock. That's not possible. Valerians can only bond with Zephyrians. It's written in the sacred texts." "Apparently," Judge Clackthrex observed dryly, "the sacred texts were incomplete. The court recognizes that a true bond has been formed between these two beings. Under galactic law, such bonds cannot be severed by outside force." Jake felt triumph surge through him, echoed by Corvash's relief and joy. But their celebration was premature. Prince Regent Valdris stood again, his face dark with rage. "If we cannot reclaim our property through law, then we invoke the ancient right of trial by combat. The human has stolen what belongs to us. Let him prove his worthiness in battle." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Jake felt his heart sink. Trial by combat was an ancient Zephyrian tradition, rarely invoked but still legally recognized by the Galactic Council. Judge Clackthrex looked troubled. Prince Regent, are you certain you wish to invoke this right? The human has committed no crime under galactic law. He has committed theft under our law, Valdris replied coldly. We invoke our right as the offended party to demand satisfaction through combat. Jake stood slowly, feeling Corvash's distress through their bond. He had no choice. If he refused the challenge, Corvash would be taken back to a life of servitude and eventual death. I accept, Jake said clearly. The battle for Corvash's freedom was about to become very real indeed. The combat arena on the neutral world of Nexus Prime was ancient, carved from black stone and surrounded by tiered seating that could accommodate thousands of spectators. Word of the trial by combat had spread quickly through diplomatic channels, and beings from across the galaxy had come to witness what many considered an impossible match. Jake stood in the preparation chamber, checking his equipment one final time. He wore the standard combat armor of the Terran military, lightweight but strong, designed for mobility rather than heavy protection. His weapons were a plasma rifle, a tactical knife, and his own training and experience. Across the arena, his opponent was making his own preparations. Prince Regent Valdris had chosen his champion, Sir Thexan, the greatest warrior in the Zephyrian military. The alien stood nearly 3 meters tall, his pale blue skin marked with ritual scars that spoke of countless victories. His weapon of choice was a massive energy blade that crackled with deadly power. Corvash paced anxiously in the preparation chamber, his mental distress flooding through their bond. Jake friend should not fight, he projected. Too dangerous. Corvash not worth human life. Jake knelt beside his companion and placed both hands on Corvash's massive head. You are worth everything to me, he said firmly. And I'm not going to lose. I have something that Warrior doesn't have. What is that? I have you, Jake replied. Our bond makes me stronger, just like it makes you stronger. We're going to fight this together. Dr. Yamamoto entered the chamber, her face grim with worry. Jake, I have to tell you, the odds are not in your favor. Zephyrian warriors are genetically enhanced for combat. Thexan is faster, stronger, and has centuries of experience. But he's never fought a human before, Jake pointed out. And he certainly hasn't fought a bonded pair. What do you mean? Dr. Yamamoto asked. Jake stood and moved to the arena entrance. Watch and see. The arena fell silent as both combatants entered from opposite sides. The crowd was a mix of species, humans cheering for Jake, Zephyrians supporting their champion, and many others simply curious to see how this unprecedented battle would unfold. Judge Clack Threx stood in the royal box, her voice amplified throughout the arena. This trial by combat will determine the fate of the Valerian Corvash. If the human Jake Morrison wins, Corvash will remain free to choose his own path. If Sir Thexan wins, Corvash returns to Zephyrian custody. The combat is to first blood or surrender. Combatants, are you ready? Both warriors raised their weapons. Jake could feel Corvash's presence in his mind, their bond creating a connection that enhanced his awareness and reflexes. Through Corvash's senses, he could perceive the arena from a different perspective, gaining tactical advantages he'd never had before. Begin, Judge Clack Threx declared. Sir Thexan moved with inhuman speed, his energy blade leaving trails of light as he attacked. But Jake was already moving, his enhanced awareness allowing him to anticipate the strike. He rolled to the side and fired his plasma rifle, the bolt searing through the air where Thexan had been a split second before. The Zephyrian warrior was clearly surprised by Jake's speed. He had expected to face a typical human, slower and weaker than his own species. Instead, he found himself fighting someone who moved with predatory grace and seemed to anticipate his every move. Jake used his human training and creativity to his advantage. While Thexan relied on formal combat techniques perfected over centuries, Jake adapted and improvised. He used the arena's architecture to his advantage, firing from cover and using debris as weapons when his rifle ran low on power. But Thexan was adapting too. The alien warrior began to understand that Jake was no ordinary human. He changed his tactics, becoming more cautious and methodical. His energy blade work was flawless, each strike calculated to push Jake back and limit his options. Through their bond, Jake felt Corvash's growing anxiety. The Valerian wanted desperately to help, but the rules of combat forbade interference from outside parties. All Corvash could do was lend his strength through their mental connection. Trust in bond, Corvash projected. Trust in pack strength, Jake understood. He stopped fighting like a lone warrior and started fighting like part of a bonded pair. He let Corvash's instincts guide his movements, using the Valerian's predatory awareness to enhance his own combat skills. The change was immediately apparent. Jake's movements became more fluid, more animalistic. He began to circle Thexan like a hunting cat, looking for weaknesses in the warrior's defenses. His attacks became more precise, more focused. Thexan noticed the change and redoubled his efforts. His energy blade sang through the air in complex patterns, forcing Jake to retreat. But Jake was learning the Zephyrian's rhythms, understanding the formal nature of his opponent's training. "You fight well for a primitive species," Thexan called out, his voice echoing through the arena. "But you cannot match centuries of refinement." Jake smiled grimly. "Maybe not, but I can match human stubbornness." He feinted left, then dove right, bringing his tactical knife up in a slashing motion. Thexan parried easily, but the move brought them into close quarters where Jake's smaller size and agility gave him an advantage. They fought hand-to-hand for several minutes, trading blows that would have been devastating to ordinary beings. Jake's armor absorbed most of the impacts, but he could feel bruises forming. Thexan, despite his size advantage, was beginning to show signs of fatigue. The key moment came when Thexan overextended on a powerful downward strike. Jake rolled aside and came up behind the Zephyrian warrior, his knife at Thexan's throat. One quick motion would draw first blood and end the combat, but instead of striking immediately, Jake hesitated. Through his bond with Corvash, he felt something unexpected: respect for the alien warrior who had fought with honor and skill. "Yield," Jake said quietly, his blade still pressed against Thexan's neck. "You fought well, but this is over." Thexan was silent for a long moment. Then, to the shock of the watching crowd, he nodded slowly. "I yield to the bonded pair. You fight with honor, human." The arena erupted in cheers and shocked exclamations. Jake stepped back and offered his hand to Thexan, who looked at it in surprise before clasping it firmly. Judge Clackthrex's voice boomed through the arena. "Sir Thexan has yielded. Victory goes to Jake Morrison. The Valerian Corvash is free to choose his own path." Jake felt a surge of triumph and relief flood through his bond with Corvash. They had won. The Valerian was free. But as Jake looked up at the royal box where Prince Regent Valdris sat, he saw something in the alien's expression that made him uneasy. This might be over, but Jake had a feeling that the Zephyrian royal family wouldn't forget or forgive this public humiliation. Corvash bounded into the arena, his joy evident as he nuzzled against Jake's shoulder. The crowd's cheers grew even louder as they witnessed the obvious affection between the human and his alien companion. "Free," Corvash projected, his mental voice filled with wonder. "Truly free. We both are," Jake replied, wrapping his arms around his friend's neck. "We both are." As they left the arena together, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was just the beginning of their story. The bond between them had been tested in combat and proven strong. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as partners. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. Jake and Corvash were ready to explore it together. 6 months after the trial by combat, Jake and Corvash had settled into a new routine aboard the exploration vessel Pathfinder. The Terran Exploration Corps had been eager to recruit the first human Valerian bonded pair, recognizing the unique advantages their partnership could bring to deep space missions. Their current assignment was a survey mission in the Outer Rim, cataloging new worlds and investigating reports of ancient ruins on the planet Kepler 442b. Jake served as the mission's chief scout and first contact specialist, while Corvash's enhanced senses and telepathic abilities made him invaluable for detecting danger and communicating with non-verbal species. The bridge of the Pathfinder hummed with quiet efficiency as Captain Lisa Wong reviewed their approach to the target planet. Jake and Corvash stood at the observation deck, watching the blue-green world grow larger on the view screen. Long-range scans confirmed the presence of artificial structures on the southern continent, reported Lieutenant Torres from the science station. "The architecture doesn't match any known species in our databases." Jake felt Corvash's interest spike through their bond. The Valerian had developed a fascination with archaeology since joining the crew, his telepathic abilities allowing him to sometimes sense emotional imprints left by ancient civilizations. "Old pain there," Corvash projected, his mental voice tinged with concern. "Something bad happened on that world." What kind of pain? Jake asked quietly. Corvash was silent for a moment, his golden eyes focused on the planet below. Death. Much death. And abandonment. Like before, with Princess who cast away. Jake frowned. Corvash's telepathic impressions had proven remarkably accurate during their previous missions. If he was sensing something traumatic in the planet's psychic residue, they needed to be prepared. Captain Wong approached them. Morrison, you and Corvash will be on the first survey team. Dr. Chen thinks these ruins might be significant, possibly a previously unknown spacefaring civilization. We'll be ready, Captain, Jake replied. But Corvash is picking up some concerning psychic impressions. Whatever happened down there, it wasn't pleasant. Captain Wong nodded thoughtfully. She'd learned to trust the bonded pair's insights over the past months. Take extra precautions then. Full archaeological survey gear and extended-range communicators. 3 hours later, Jake and Corvash descended through the planet's atmosphere in a survey shuttle, accompanied by Dr. Sarah Chen, the mission's xenoarchaeologist, and a security detail led by Sergeant Maria Santos. The ruins were located in a vast valley surrounded by crystalline formations that caught the light from the system's twin suns. As they approached the landing site, Jake could feel Corvash's discomfort growing stronger. The Valyrian's usual calm confidence was replaced by agitation and a deep sense of sorrow. The structures are definitely artificial, Dr. Chen observed as they flew over the ruins. Look at the symmetry and the way they're integrated into the natural landscape. This civilization had an advanced understanding of architectural harmony, but Jake was more focused on Corvash's reaction. The Valyrian's breathing had become labored, and his mental projections were filled with images of suffering and loss. So many voices, Corvash projected, crying out, begging for help that never came. They landed near the largest structure, a crystalline spire that rose over 100 meters into the sky. As soon as they stepped out of the shuttle, Corvash collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by the psychic echoes surrounding them. Corvash, Jake knelt beside his companion, placing his hands on the Valyrian's head. Through their bond, he felt a flood of alien emotions, fear, desperation, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Dr. Chen approached with her scanning equipment. The psychic resonance here is incredible. It's like the stones themselves are saturated with emotional energy. Sergeant Santos deployed her security team around the perimeter, while Jake helped Corvash to his feet. The Valyrian was shaking, his usual golden composure shattered by whatever he was experiencing. Can you tell me what you're sensing? Jake asked gently. Corvash's response came in fragmented images and emotions. Jake saw flashes of a great civilization, beings that looked remarkably similar to Valyrians but with crystalline growths along their spines. They had been bonded to another species, elegant humanoids with flowing silver hair and pale skin that looked disturbingly familiar. Zephyrians, Jake breathed, or their ancestors. More images flooded through the bond. The crystal spine Valyrians had served their partners faithfully for generations, helping to build this beautiful city in harmony with the planet's natural crystalline formations. But then something had changed. A great catastrophe had struck, not a natural disaster, but something deliberate. The Silver Ones left, Corvash projected, his mental voice filled with ancient pain. When the Starfire came, they left their guardians behind, took the sky ships and fled to safety, leaving their bonded to die. Jake felt sick as he understood what Corvash was showing him. When some kind of stellar catastrophe had threatened this world, the Proto-Zephyrians had evacuated their own people, but abandoned their Valyrian partners to face extinction alone. Dr. Chen's scans confirmed the timeline. There's evidence of a massive solar flare event approximately 2,000 years ago. The radiation would have been lethal to most life forms, but the crystalline structures seem to have provided some protection. Not enough protection, Jake said grimly. He could see in Corvash's memories how the abandoned Valyrians had tried desperately to survive, using the crystal formations as shields against the deadly radiation. Some had lived for weeks or even months, but in the end they had all perished, alone, betrayed, and forgotten. Corvash moved toward the central spire, drawn by some compulsion Jake couldn't understand. As they approached, Jake noticed that the crystalline walls were covered with markings, not carved decorations, but scratch marks made by claws. These are messages, Dr. Chen said excitedly, running her scanners over the walls. Final communications left by the dying population. Jake placed his hand on the crystal surface, and through his bond with Corvash, he could sense the emotional resonance of those final messages. They weren't calls for rescue or pleas for help. They were messages of forgiveness and love, directed toward the partners who had abandoned them. Even at the end, they did not hate, Corvash projected, his mental voice filled with wonder and grief. They understood fear. They forgave. The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. These ancient Valyrians had faced extinction with dignity and grace, maintaining their loyalty and love even for those who had betrayed them. It was a level of nobility that Jake could barely comprehend. Over the next several hours, they documented the ruins and collected samples for analysis. Each new discovery painted a clearer picture of what had happened. The Proto-Zephyrians had indeed fled when the solar event threatened their colony, taking their most advanced technology and leaving their Valyrian partners behind with only basic survival equipment. As the team prepared to return to their shuttle, Corvash approached the central spire one final time. He placed his massive paws against the crystal surface and bowed his head in what Jake recognized as a gesture of respect and mourning. "I remember them," Corvash projected. "Their voices will not be forgotten." Jake joined his companion at the crystal wall, placing his own hand next to Corvash's paws. Through their bond, he felt the weight of ancient sorrow, but also something else, a determination that such betrayal would never happen again. As they flew back to the Pathfinder, Jake found himself thinking about Princess Alara and her family. The capacity for betrayal seemed to be bred into Zephyrian nobility, passed down through generations like a genetic flaw. But it didn't have to define the relationship between their species. "We're going to make sure the galaxy knows what happened here," Jake told Corvash. "These beings deserve to be remembered and their story needs to be told." "Yes," Corvash agreed. "Truth must be shared. Others must learn." Jake realized that their mission had become about more than just exploration and discovery. They were carrying the voices of the forgotten, ensuring that the sacrifices of the past would not be repeated in the future. The bond between humans and Valyrians was still new, but it was built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jake was determined that their relationship would be everything the ancient bond should have been: loyal, protective, and unbreakable. 2 years after discovering the ruins on Kepler 442b, Jake and Corvash had become legends throughout the galaxy. Their story had inspired dozens of other human-Valyrian bonds, fundamentally changing the relationship between the two species. The Terran-Valyrian alliance had grown into one of the most respected partnerships in galactic politics. Jake now served as Earth's first ambassador to the Valyrian homeworld of Thalassen, a beautiful planet of golden grasslands and crystal cities. His residence was a graceful structure that blended human and Valyrian architectural styles, with wide-open spaces that accommodated beings of all sizes. The morning sun cast long shadows across the embassy grounds as Jake reviewed the latest diplomatic reports. Relations with the Zephyrian royal houses had remained tense since the trial by combat, but most of the galaxy had embraced the new human-Valyrian partnerships with enthusiasm. Corvash entered the study, his movements more deliberate than usual. Age was beginning to show in the great Valyrian's gait, though his golden eyes remained as bright and intelligent as ever. At nearly 30 years old, he was considered elderly for his species, but the bond with Jake seemed to have extended his vitality. "Important visitors coming," Corvash projected, settling beside Jake's desk. Can sense their approach, much anxiety in their thoughts. Jake looked up from his reports with interest. "Who is it?" Before Corvash could answer, Jake's assistant, a young human named David Park, entered the study with an expression of barely controlled amazement. "Ambassador Morrison," David said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We have a delegation requesting immediate audience." It's Princess Alara of the Zephyrian royal house." Jake felt Corvash's surprise and old pain echo through their bond. They hadn't seen or heard from Princess Alara since the trial by combat. Reports suggested she had fallen from favor within her own royal house after the public humiliation of losing a Valyrian to a human. "What does she want?" Jake asked. "She says it's a matter of life and death, sir. She's brought her own Valyrian guardian with her." Jake and Corvash exchanged glances. Princess Alara with a new Valyrian partner was unexpected. The royal family had been very public about their rejection of human Valyrian bonds, claiming they were unnatural and inferior to traditional Zephyrian partnerships. Send them in, Jake decided, but keep security on standby. 10 minutes later, Princess Alara entered the study, and Jake was shocked by the change in her appearance. The imperious, coldly beautiful Zephyrian he remembered had been replaced by someone who looked haggard and desperate. Her usually pristine robes were travel-stained, and her eyes held a haunted quality. Behind her walked a young Valyrian, barely more than a cub. The small creature stayed close to Alara's side, but Jake could sense its fear and confusion through his bond with Corvash. Youngling is sick, Corvash projected immediately. Mind bond is broken, damaged. Will die soon without help. Princess Alara, Jake said formally, rising from his chair. This is unexpected. Alara's composure cracked slightly. Ambassador Morrison, Corvash. She nodded to each of them in turn. I need your help. Jake gestured to chairs arranged around a low table. Please sit. Tell us what's happened. As they settled, Jake got a better look at the young Valyrian. The cub was thin and weak, its fur dull and lifeless. Most concerning were its eyes, while Corvash's golden gaze was alert and aware. This youngling's eyes were clouded and distant. This is Miran, Alara said, placing a protective hand on the young Valyrian's head. She was bonded to my cousin, Prince Kalar. 3 months ago, Kalar was killed in a hunting accident. Since then, Miran has been dying. Jake understood immediately. When a Valyrian's bonded partner died, the psychic trauma often proved fatal. It was one of the tragic aspects of their species' empathic nature. The royal healers can't help her. Alara continued, her voice breaking slightly. They say the bond trauma is too severe. But I've heard that human Valyrian bonds are different, stronger, more healing. Corvash rose and approached the young Valyrian slowly. Miran looked up at him with unfocused eyes, and Jake felt a wave of sympathy flow through his bond with Corvash. She suffers as I once did, Corvash projected. Abandoned, forgotten, left to die alone. What exactly are you asking us to do? Jake asked Alara. The princess took a shuddering breath. I'm asking you to help me form a new bond with Miran. I know what you must think of me, how I treated Corvash was unforgivable. But I've learned from my mistakes. I've spent the last 2 years studying human Valyrian partnerships, trying to understand what I did wrong. Jake was skeptical. And what did you learn? That I was never Corvash's partner, Alara said quietly. I was his owner. I took his loyalty for granted and gave nothing in return. I treated him like property instead of recognizing him as an equal. Corvash moved closer to Miran, gently nuzzling the young Valyrian. The cub responded slightly, a faint spark of awareness flickering in her eyes. Even if what you're saying is true, Jake said, I'm not sure it's possible. Miran was bonded to your cousin. The psychic trauma of his death may have damaged her ability to form new bonds. Please, Alara said, and Jake was startled to see tears running down her pale blue cheeks. I can't watch another Valyrian die because of my family's failures. I won't let our mistakes claim another innocent life. Jake looked at Corvash, who was still gently caring for the young Valyrian. Through their bond, he felt his partner's compassion for the suffering youngling. Can try, Corvash projected. Human bond is different. Healing instead of owning. Might reach through her pain. Jake made his decision. We'll try, but this has to be done carefully. If Miran's psyche is as damaged as it appears, a forced bonding could kill her. Over the next several hours, Jake worked with Alara and the young Valyrian, guided by Corvash's wisdom and experience. The process was delicate and emotionally exhausting. Miran's mind was indeed severely damaged by the trauma of losing her first bond, and she resisted their attempts to reach her. But Alara proved she had genuinely changed. Instead of trying to dominate or control the bonding process, she opened herself completely to Miran's pain and fear. She offered comfort without demanding anything in return, love without expecting obedience. Jake felt the moment when something shifted. Through his bond with Corvash, he sensed a tiny spark of response from Miran, the young Valyrian's damaged. Psyche began to heal as Alara's genuine care and affection reached through her trauma. The bonding was nothing like the dramatic golden light that had marked Jake and Corvash's partnership. Instead, it was a gentle silver glow that grew slowly between Alara and Miran. fragile but real. When it was complete, Moran raised her head for the first time in months, her eyes clear and alert. She nuzzled against Alara's hand, and the princess broke down in tears of relief and joy. "Thank you," Alara whispered to Jake and Corvash. "Thank you for giving me the chance to do this right." Jake felt a deep satisfaction through his bond with Corvash. They had not only saved a life but had helped heal the ancient wound between their species. "What will you do now?" Jake asked. Alara stood, her hand resting gently on Moran's head. "I'm going to spend my life proving that Zephyrians can be worthy partners to Valerians. I'm going to teach my people what I learned from watching you and Corvash, that true partnership requires mutual respect, not ownership." As the princess and her new partner prepared to leave, Corvash approached them one final time. The great Valerian touched noses with young Moran in a gesture of blessing and welcome. Jake felt the moment through their bond, a passing of wisdom from elder to youngling, a promise that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The circle closes. Corvash projected as they watched Alara and Miran depart. Pain becomes healing. Abandonment becomes partnership. Jake placed his hand on his companion's head, marveling once again at the depth of Valerian wisdom and compassion. "You've done something remarkable here, old friend. You've helped create a better future for both our species." "We did it together," Corvash corrected, "as always together." As the twin sons of Thalassen sat behind the crystal spires of the city, Jake and Corvash stood together on their embassy balcony, looking out at a galaxy where humans and Valerians worked as true partners. The bond between them had grown from a simple rescue into something that changed the course of history. The alien princess who had once left her lion to die had learned the true meaning of partnership. And in that learning, she had helped ensure that no Valerian would ever be abandoned again. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility, and built on the foundation of mutual respect, trust, and love that defined the true bond between species. Jake and Corvash had started something that would outlast them both, a legacy of partnership that would echo through the stars for generations to come.